Did you know that some of the most influential figures of the Middle Ages, from roughly the 5th to the 15th century, might not be who you think? Were you aware that groups of women often overlooked by history were actually running major institutions, shaping culture, and even influencing powerful rulers? Get ready to have your understanding of medieval society completely flip. Number 9. Political influencers and diplomatic figures. Medieval convents, far from being isolated spiritual retreats, often functioned as powerful centers of political influence. Abbesses, especially those presiding over wealthy and ancient foundations, held significant secular authority alongside their spiritual duties. These women were not just spiritual leaders, they were formidable landlords, administrators, and sometimes even diplomats engaging directly with kings, emperors, and popes. Their influence stemmed from a combination of factors: the vast landholdings and wealth of their monasteries, their noble birth, and their respected spiritual authority. One striking example is the Abbey of Quedlinburg in present-day Germany. Founded in 936 by Otto I, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and his mother, Queen Matilda, it was intended as a memorial to Otto's father, Henry the Fowler. From its very beginning, Quedlinburg was a royal abbey, directly under the protection and patronage of the emperor. Its abbesses were typically chosen from the highest noble families, often members of the imperial Ottonian dynasty itself. Matilda, daughter of Emperor Otto I, became the first abbess in 966 and served until her death in 999. Under her leadership, Quedlinburg became a hub of political and cultural activity. Imperial diets, important gatherings of the empire's nobility and clergy, were frequently held there. The very presence of the emperor and his court in the abbey suggested the immense prestige and political weight of the abbess. Matilda herself was a highly educated and politically astute woman. Her brother, Emperor Otto II, entrusted his young daughter, also named Matilda, to her care for education at Quedlinburg. This practice was common. Royal and noble daughters were often sent to convents like Quedlinburg to receive an education, forge connections, and sometimes even prepare for a life in the church. The Abbess of Quedlinburg was considered a princess of the empire, holding direct feudal rights and responsibilities, commanding her own contingent of knights and presiding over a vast territory. She issued her own charters, collected taxes, and administered justice within her domains. This level of secular power for a woman was extremely rare outside of regents or widowed queens. Yet it was a fundamental aspect of the abbess's roles in these imperial foundations. Another powerful figure was Adelaide, who succeeded Matilda as Abbess of Quedlinburg from 999 to 1044. Adelaide, also a member of the imperial house, exercised even greater political influence. She was a granddaughter of Otto I and was for a period considered a potential successor to the imperial throne due to various dynastic complications. She advised her brother, Emperor Otto III, and later her cousin, Emperor Henry II, on matters of state. She even acted as a regent during the minority of her nephew, Emperor Henry III. Documents show her presiding over assemblies, mediating disputes between nobles, and affirming legal decisions that impacted vast territories. Her abbacy represented a pinnacle of a nun's political power in the Holy Roman Empire. The abbey's strategic location and its direct link to the imperial family ensured its continued importance as a political center. Hrotsvitha of Gandersheim, a canoness at the Abbey of Gandersheim in Saxony during the 10th century, showcased political influence through her literary works. While not an abbess, her convent was another imperial foundation, similar in stature to Quedlinburg. Gandersheim was established by Duke Leodolf of Saxony and his wife Oda, ancestors of the Ottonian dynasty. Hrotsvitha wrote plays, poems, and historical narratives that were highly regarded in her time. Her plays were not just for entertainment. They often conveyed moral and political messages, designed to influence the court and educate the elite. She wrote about the lives of saints and virtuous women, often contrasting their piety with the perceived excesses of Roman paganism. Her historical works, such as Gesta Autonis, detailed the deeds of Emperor Otto I and his son Otto II, celebrating their rule and subtly offering guidance on righteous leadership. Hrotsvitha had access to the imperial court through her abbess Gerberga, who was a niece of Emperor Otto I. This connection allowed her works to reach and influence the most powerful figures of the Ottonian realm. Her writings provided moral frameworks for rulers, celebrated the values of the empire, and subtly shaped perceptions of power and virtue. This kind of intellectual influence, while less direct than an abbess managing armies, was a significant form of political engagement. Further south, Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century abbess in the Rhineland, wielded immense political and spiritual authority. Though her convents at Rupertsberg and Bingen were not imperial foundations in the same vein as Quedlinburg, Hildegard's influence was personal and profound. She was known for her prophetic visions, which she believed were divine communications. These visions gave her a unique spiritual authority that transcended the normal hierarchical structures of the Church. She corresponded extensively with emperors, kings, popes, and archbishops, offering advice, warnings, and sometimes stern condemnations on political and ecclesiastical matters. She famously corresponded with Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa, urging him to reform his ways and align with the Church. She also wrote to various popes, including Eugenius III and Anastasius IV, on theological issues and matters of church governance. Her letters were not just polite exchanges. They were often direct, challenging, and filled with a sense of divine urgency. She undertook preaching tours, a highly unusual activity for a woman in the Middle Ages, traveling through the Rhine Valley and beyond to deliver her messages to both clergy and lay people. These public pronouncements, often laced with political commentary, further solidified her reputation and influence. Her ability to command the attention of Europe's most powerful men demonstrated a unique form of political agency, one rooted in spiritual charisma but with very real secular implication. Even smaller convents, often founded by local nobility, played a role in regional politics. They served as repositories of family charters, sometimes even as safe havens during local feuds, and as places where noble families could cement their spiritual and social standing. The abbess of such a convent was often closely related to the founding family, acting as a crucial link in the family's network of power and influence. They could mediate disputes between relatives, oversee dowries, and manage inheritances, all of which had significant political ramifications in a fragmented feudal landscape. The financial independence of many convents derived from their landholdings also gave them a degree of autonomy that secular noblewomen often lacked. They could make independent decisions about their estates, their tenants, and their alliances, without direct male oversight. This financial and administrative autonomy translated into a quiet but persistent form of political power, allowing abbesses to protect their communities and sometimes even their broader regions. The very existence of these female-led institutions, managing vast resources and influencing significant decisions, challenges common perceptions of medieval women's roles in society. Number 8. Horticulturalists and pharmacists. Medieval nuns were not just spiritual guides and intellectual figures. They were also highly skilled practitioners of herbal medicine and advanced horticulture. Convents often maintained extensive gardens that served multiple purposes, providing food, raw materials for crafts, and, most importantly, a rich source of medicinal plants. Care of the sick was a fundamental aspect of monastic charity, and this responsibility often fell to the nuns, who developed sophisticated knowledge of botany and pharmacology. Their infirmaries were often the primary source of healthcare for the local community, demonstrating a practical application of their scientific and botanical expertise. The monastic garden, or herbarium, was a central feature of almost every convent. These gardens were meticulously planned and cultivated, often divided into distinct sections: a kitchen garden for vegetables and culinary herbs, a physic garden for medicinal plants, and sometimes an orchard. The nuns responsible for these gardens, often known as herbarius or infirmarians, possessed a deep understanding of plant properties, growth cycles, and preparation methods. They would collect seeds, propagate plants, and carefully document their observations. This systematic approach to plant cultivation and knowledge was an early form of botanical science. They recognized the importance of soil quality, sunlight exposure, and water for different species, applying practical ecological principles in their daily work. For example, lavender was grown for its calming properties and pleasant scent, often used in compresses or as an aromatic to aid sleep. Chamomile was cultivated for its anti-inflammatory and soothing effects, commonly prepared as a tea for digestive issues or nervousness. Comfrey, known for its bone-healing properties, was applied as a poultice to wounds and fractures. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess, stands out as an extraordinary figure in the realm of medieval medicine and natural science. Her two major medical works, Physica, also known as Liber Subtilitatum Diversarum Naturarum Curarum, and Causae et Curae, document a vast body of medical knowledge derived from both traditional practices and her own observations. Physica is a detailed catalog of various plants, trees, stones, animals, and metals, describing their medicinal properties and uses. For each entry, Hildegard provided information on its nature, how it interacts with the human body, and specific remedies derived from it. For example, she discussed the use of fennel for eye problems and digestion, or the healing properties of sage for various ailments. Causae et Curae delves into the causes and cures of diseases, offering a comprehensive view of human physiology, pathology, and therapeutics from a medieval perspective. It covers a wide range of conditions, from fevers and headaches to more complex internal disorders. While some of her theories might seem unfamiliar today, her approach was remarkably holistic, considering the interplay of diet, environment, spiritual well-being, and physical symptoms. Her work included hundreds of plant-based remedies, detailing specific preparations like tinctures, salves, poultices, and decoctions. The knowledge within convents was often passed down through generations of nuns, creating a continuous tradition of herbal medicine. Novices would learn from older, more experienced sisters, participating in the daily tasks of the garden and the infirmary. This oral tradition was complemented by written texts, including compendiums of remedies and translations of classical medical works. Monastic infirmaries were well equipped for their time. They typically included a ward for patients, a pharmacy or armarium pigmentorum for preparing and storing medicines, and often a separate room for surgical procedures or specialized treatments. The nuns acting as infirmarians were skilled nurses, diagnosticians, and apothecaries. They were adept at observing symptoms, managing patient care, and administering complex treatments. They understood the importance of hygiene, cleanliness, and fresh air in patient recovery. The scale of these operations could be quite impressive. Larger convents might have extensive networks of gardens and specialized buildings dedicated to healthcare. They produced not only remedies for their own community, but also for the surrounding population, who often had limited access to other forms of medical care. Local villagers and even noble families would seek treatment at the convent infirmary, recognizing the nuns' expertise and compassionate care. This meant that convents were not just religious institutions, but vital, public health centers. They often collaborated with local farmers to cultivate specific medicinal crops, contributing to the agricultural economy. The nuns' careful management of their gardens also contributed to the preservation of biodiversity. By cultivating and propagating various species, they maintained a living archive of plant knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Their experimentation with different plant combinations and preparations further advanced the field of natural medicine. Beyond strictly medicinal uses, nuns also cultivated plants for dyes, perfumes, and for the ornamentation of their churches and chapels. The aesthetic beauty of the monastic garden was also appreciated, offering a place of contemplation and tranquility. A combination of spiritual devotion, meticulous scientific observation, and practical application of knowledge made medieval nuns pioneering figures in horticulture and pharmacology, laying groundwork for future medical advancements and demonstrating an intellectual curiosity about the natural world that went beyond simple piety. Their contributions were fundamental to the health and well-being of medieval society, often providing the only accessible health care in rural areas. Number 7. Social welfare poters. Medieval nuns were at the forefront of social welfare, offering vital services to the most vulnerable members of society. Their convents functioned as extensive charitable organizations, providing hospices for travelers, food for the poor, care for the sick, and refuge for orphans and the elderly. This commitment to charity was deeply rooted in Christian teachings, which emphasized compassion and service to those in need. Convents often served as the primary, and sometimes only safety net for local communities, especially in times of famine, disease, or social unrest. Hospices run by convents were crucial way stations for pilgrims and travelers. During the Middle Ages, journeys were arduous and dangerous, with few safe places for rest and shelter. Monastic hospices provided not only a place to sleep, but also food, medical care, and spiritual comfort. Nuns would welcome weary travelers, offering them a bed, a warm meal, and tending to any injuries or illnesses they had sustained on their journey. This hospitality was not just for the wealthy. It was extended to all, embodying a spirit of universal charity. The Abbey of Shaftesbury in England, a prominent Benedictine nunnery, was renowned for its extensive hospitality, accommodating numerous pilgrims and local poor, with its considerable resources derived from vast land holdings. The daily provision of food and shelter for outsiders required significant logistical planning and the dedication of numerous nuns and lay staff. Beyond hospitality, for travelers, convents were deeply involved in direct aid to the poor and hungry in their immediate vicinity. Almsgiving was a regular practice. Many convents maintained a dedicated eleemosynary or almonry, where food often left over from the convent's own kitchen was distributed to the needy. Bread, stew, and sometimes even beer were given out on a regular basis, often daily. In times of scarcity, such as bad harvests or famine, the convent's stores accumulated from their agricultural estates provided a crucial lifeline for starving populations. This demonstrated the immense economic power of convents being directly translated into social good. For instance, the abbess of a large Benedictine house might oversee estates that produced enough surplus grain to feed hundreds, if not thousands, of people in a crisis. This form of direct relief was essential in a period without state-sponsored welfare systems. Orphanages and care for abandoned children were another significant contribution. While the concept of a dedicated orphanage as we understand it today was still developing, many convents took in children who had lost their parents due to plague, war, or poverty. These children, both boys and girls, would be housed, fed, clothed, and educated within the convent walls. Girls might be raised to become nuns themselves or trained in domestic skills to find employment in noble households. Boys might be trained in monastic trades or prepared for entry into male monasteries or other professions. St. Agnes of Prague, a 13th century Bohemian princess, founded a hospital and a mendicant order of Franciscan nuns and friars. Her foundations included institutions specifically for the care of the poor, the sick, and orphaned children, choosing a comprehensive approach to social welfare that was groundbreaking for its time. She personally worked in these institutions, demonstrating a deep commitment to the practical application of Christian charity. Care for the sick and elderly was also a continuous responsibility. As discussed, convent infirmaries were places of medical treatment, but they also served as long-term care facilities for the chronically ill and the infirm elderly, both from within the monastic community and from outside. Older members of the local community, especially those without family support, might be admitted to the convent's care, living out their final years in relative comfort and with spiritual guidance. This included providing palliative care, ensuring dignity in old age, and offering a peaceful end of life. Nuns were involved in the daily routines of nursing, feeding, comforting, and spiritual guidance for these individuals, a demanding and compassionate task. The funding for these extensive social welfare programs came from various sources. Convents relied on the income generated from their vast land holdings and agricultural production, which often included mills, breweries, and workshops. Donations from wealthy patrons, including noble families and royalty, also provided significant financial support. These patrons often saw their donations as an act of piety, securing prayers for their souls, while also benefiting the wider community. The nuns themselves often engaged in various crafts and trades, like weaving, embroidery, or manuscript production, the proceeds of which could be used to support their charitable activities. This economic self-sufficiency was crucial for sustaining their welfare provisions. Commitment of medieval nuns to alleviating suffering and providing for the needy had a profound and tangible impact on the lives of countless individuals. Their convents were not just places of prayer. They were bustling centers of community service, offering crucial support systems that were integral to the social fabric of the medieval world. They demonstrated a powerful model of collective responsibility and compassionate action that remains influential in the history of social welfare. Number 6. Spiritual leaders and mystics. Medieval nuns were often profound, spiritual leaders and innovators, shaping theological thought and devotional practices through their mystical experiences, writings, and influential roles within the Church and wider society. Despite formal limitations on women's participation in the priesthood, nuns carved out significant spaces for spiritual authority, often through direct communion with the divine, which conferred upon them a unique and undeniable legitimacy. Their insights and visions influenced popes, emperors, and everyday believers, creating new spiritual pathways and deepening the understanding of the divine. Hildegard of Bingen, active in the 12th century, is perhaps the most famous example of a medieval nun who became a visionary and spiritual authority. From a young age, she experienced vivid religious visions, which she initially kept secret. Only later, encouraged by her confessor and Pope Eugenius III, did she begin to record them. Her magnum opus Civias, Know the Ways, details 26 of her visions, which she interpreted as direct revelations from God. These visions were not merely personal experiences. They contained complex theological teachings, prophecies, and moral exhortations for both the clergy and the laity. Hildegard fearlessly criticized corruption within the Church and among secular rulers, believing she was divinely commanded to speak truth to power. Her spiritual authority was recognized by figures as high as Pope Eugenius III, who personally endorsed her visions. She also wrote extensive theological works, including Liber Divinorum, Abirum, Book of Divine Works, and Liber Vitae Meritarum, Book of Life's Merits, which explored cosmology, human morality, and the relationship between the divine and the created world. Beyond her writings, Hildegard composed sacred music, hymns and chants, which are still performed today, enriching the liturgical life of the Church and expressing profound spiritual concepts through art. Her spiritual leadership extended to embarking on extensive preaching tours, a highly unusual activity for a woman in her era, further solidifying her public spiritual presence. The 13th and 14th centuries saw the emergence of numerous female mystics, particularly in the Low Countries in Germany, often associated with the Bingen movement and Dominican convents. Matilda of Magdeburg, a Bingen who later joined a Cistercian convent, composed The Flowing Light of the Godhead in Middle Low German. This work is a passionate and intensely personal account of her mystical experiences, written in both prose and poetry. Matilda described her soul's journey towards union with God, using rich, evocative language that often borrowed from courtly love poetry. Her mystical visions detailed encounters with divine love, insights into the nature of God, and critiques of worldly behavior. Her writings were widely circulated and deeply influenced other mystics, including Meister Eckhart and Heinrich Suso. Matilda's work provided a powerful, accessible spiritual voice for women who sought a direct personal relationship with the divine, bypassing traditional male ecclesiastical intermediaries. She boldly asserted her experiences as authentic divine revelations, providing a spiritual model for other women seeking deep piety. Julian of Norwich, an English anchoress living in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, is another seminal figure. An anchoress was a recluse who lived in a small cell attached to a church, dedicating her life to prayer and contemplation. Julian experienced a series of intense visions during a severe illness in 1373, which she meticulously recorded and reflected upon over many years. Her work, Revelations of Divine Love, is the first book in the English language known to be written by a woman. It is remarkable for its profound theological insights, particularly its emphasis on God's unconditional love and mercy, and its portrayal of Jesus as a nurturing mother figure. Julian's theology was deeply optimistic and comforting, offering solace during a period marked by plague and social upheaval. Her serene contemplation of suffering and salvation offered a radical, hopeful perspective on divine nature. While Julian was not a nun in a formal convent, her reclusive, contemplative life was deeply aligned with monastic ideals, and her work certainly influenced nuns and other devout women who sought spiritual guidance. Bridget of Sweden, a 14th century widow and noblewoman, founded the Brigittine order, a unique double monastery where nuns and monks lived in separate but adjacent enclosures under the authority of an abbess. Bridget herself experienced numerous visions and revelations, which she dictated and compiled into her Revelations. These visions contained theological insights, moral admonitions, and specific instructions for the reform of the Church and society. Bridget traveled extensively, including to Rome and Jerusalem, advocating for her reforms and engaging directly with popes and political leaders. Her spiritual authority was immense, leading to the foundation of a new monastic order that spread across Europe, creating communities where nuns held significant spiritual and administrative power. Brigittine model emphasized the abbesses' spiritual leadership over both male and female monastics, a bold and innovative arrangement. These women, and many others like them, shaped medieval spirituality by offering fresh perspectives on God, sin, and salvation. They developed new forms of prayer, emphasized personal spiritual experience, and often provided a more emotional and compassionate understanding of the divine than was sometimes found in academic theology. Their mystical writings became guides for countless individuals seeking deeper spiritual connection. They challenged the prevailing patriarchal norms by asserting their direct access to divine truth, demonstrating that spiritual authority was not exclusively the domain of men. Their profound spiritual insights and leadership were instrumental in revitalizing religious life and providing a vital intellectual and emotional outlet for women in the Middle Ages. Number 5. Economic powerhouses and land managers. Beyond their spiritual and intellectual pursuits, medieval nuns and their convents were formidable economic entities, functioning as substantial land managers, agricultural producers, and contributors to local and regional economies. Abbesses often presided over vast estates, sometimes rivaling those of powerful male lords, making them significant players in the feudal economy. The financial independence and administrative autonomy of these institutions were remarkable, allowing them to exert considerable influence and sustain their multifaceted activities. The wealth of many medieval convents originated from generous donations of land and resources by noble and royal families. These donations were often made as acts of piety, intended to secure prayers for the benefactors' souls, but they also reflected the trust placed in convents as stable institutions capable of managing substantial assets. Over centuries, these landholdings accumulated, making some convents incredibly rich. For example, the Abbey of Shaftesbury in Wessex, England, founded by King Alfred the Great in the 9th century, became one of the wealthiest nunneries in England. Its abbess was a major landholder, overseeing extensive manors, farms, and numerous tenants. The Domesday Book, a survey of England completed in 1086, records Shaftesbury's vast possessions, including numerous villages and thousands of acres of agricultural land. The Abbess of Shaftesbury effectively functioned as a feudal baroness, collecting rents, administering justice within her deme, and commanding the labor of her tenants. The management of these estates was a complex undertaking, requiring sophisticated administrative skills. Abbesses and their obedient heiries, officers of the convent, were responsible for overseeing agricultural production, livestock raising, and resource extraction. They managed tenant farmers, adjudicated disputes, and ensured the smooth operation of mills, bakeries, and breweries that often belonged to the convent. They maintained detailed accounts of income and expenditure, demonstrating a high degree of financial literacy and organizational capability. For instance, the Abbey of Barking, another ancient and wealthy English nunnery, meticulously recorded its revenues from land rents and various economic activities, showing careful financial stewardship over centuries. Agricultural production was a cornerstone of the monastic economy. Convents engaged in large-scale farming, producing grains like wheat, barley, and oats for their own consumption and for sale in local markets. They raised livestock, including sheep for wool and meat, cattle for dairy and draft power, and pigs. Wool production was particularly lucrative for many nunneries, especially in England, where wool was a major commodity. Nuns might oversee sheep shearing, wool cleaning, spinning, and weaving, contributing directly or indirectly to the textile industry. Some convents were known for the quality of their textiles and embroidery, which were not only used internally, but also sold or gifted to patrons, generating additional income. Beyond agriculture, convents often engaged in various forms of craftsmanship and proto-industrial activities. They ran mills for grinding grain, breweries for producing ale, a staple drink in the Middle Ages, and sometimes even fisheries or salt production sites if located near coastlines or salt springs. These activities not only provided for the convent's needs, but also generated surplus goods for trade, integrating the convent into broader regional economies. For example, some convents produced excellent wine from their vineyards, which was sold to nobility or to other religious institutions. Their economic self-sufficiency was a point of pride and a source of strength, enabling them to maintain their independence from external control. The financial resources accumulated by convents were not merely for their own maintenance. They were used to fund their extensive charitable activities, to build and maintain their churches and monastic buildings, and to support their scriptoria and libraries. Investing in art, education, and social welfare was a direct consequence of their economic prowess. Construction of grand monastic churches and elaborate convent complexes, such as those at Quedlinburg or Gandersheim, required immense financial outlay and sophisticated project management, demonstrating the nuns' ability to oversee large-scale construction and engineering projects. The abbesses made significant financial decisions, acting as investors and developers in their own right. The economic power of abbesses also gave them political leverage. As major landlords, they were important feudal vassals, obligated to provide military service, often through their tenants or hired knights, and financial contributions to their sovereign. This participation in the feudal system gave them a voice in regional assemblies and access to powerful networks. Their economic stability made them reliable lenders or guarantors, further enhancing their influence. The management of these vast and complex economic enterprises, from agricultural planning to financial accounting and trade, demonstrates a level of administrative and business acumen that was far removed from common stereotypes of cloistered women. Nuns were not just beneficiaries of wealth. They were active creators and managers of it, powering significant portions of the medieval economy and using their resources to support their communities and preserve culture. Number 4. Artists and patrons of the arts. Medieval nuns were not just passive recipients of art. They were active creators, innovators, and powerful patrons, shaping the aesthetic and spiritual landscape of their time. Within the quiet walls of their convents, sisters developed sophisticated artistic skills, particularly in manuscript, illumination, textile arts, and metalwork. Furthermore, wealthy abbesses commissioned grand architectural projects and other forms of art, demonstrating significant influence on the development of medieval aesthetics. Manuscript illumination was a primary artistic endeavor within many nunneries. Pretoria, dedicated workshops for copying and decorating books, were often the thriving centers of artistic production. Nuns meticulously prepared parchment, mixed vibrant pigments, and applied gold leaf to create stunning illuminated manuscripts. These were not just functional texts. They were works of art, rich with intricate borders, detailed miniatures, and elaborate initial letters. The Horticulture, Garden of Delights, compiled by Herod of Landsberg, Abbess of Hornberg Abbey in Alsace in the late 12th century, is a monumental example. This encyclopedic work, designed as a teaching tool for the nuns of her community, contained over 1,100 illustrations accompanying texts on theology, philosophy, history, and science. The illustrations are diverse, depicting biblical scenes, allegories, historical events, and even scientific concepts. While Herod likely oversaw and inspired the project, many hands contributed to its creation, including the nuns of her convent, treating a Quedlinburg artistic environment. The sheer scale and artistic quality of the Horticulture were exceptional for its time, demonstrating the nuns' artistic skill and intellectual ambition. Although the original manuscript was tragically destroyed in 1870, copies of its illustrations and texts have preserved its invaluable artistic and historical content. Beyond manuscripts, nuns excelled in various forms of textile art, particularly embroidery and liturgical vestments. Creation of altar cloths, vestments for priests, and hangings for the church was a labor-intensive and highly skilled craft. Nuns used fine silks, gold and silver threads, and elaborate stitching techniques to create pieces of breathtaking beauty and intricate detail. These textiles were not just decorative. They imbued religious ceremonies with splendor and communicated theological messages through their iconography. For example, the Opus Anglicanum, a highly prized form of English embroidery from the 13th and 14th centuries, was known for its exceptional quality and often included contributions from nunneries. The needlework pieces often depicted scenes from the Bible, lives of saints, or complex allegories, requiring not only technical skill, but also a deep understanding of iconography and theological symbolism. Metalwork, especially for liturgical objects, like chalices, crosses, and reliquaries, was another artistic domain where nuns participated. While the most elaborate metalwork might have been outsourced to male artisans, convents certainly produced smaller, devotional items themselves and certainly commissioned larger, more complex pieces. Patronage of abbesses played a crucial role in shaping the artistic output of the Middle Ages. Wealthy abbesses, like those of Quedlinburg, Gandersheim, and Shaftesbury, used their considerable economic resources to commission major architectural projects. They oversaw the construction and renovation of grand monastic churches, cloisters, chapter houses, and infirmaries. These projects involved engaging master masons, sculptors, painters, and glassmakers. The surviving architecture of many medieval convents, from the Romanesque and Gothic periods, stands as a testament to the abbess's vision, financial power, and aesthetic sensibilities. For instance, the collegiate church at Quedlinburg, under the patronage of its imperial abbesses, underwent significant building campaigns, incorporating elements of contemporary architectural styles and commissioning intricate sculptural programs. Nuns also played a role in the dissemination of artistic styles and ideas. As copies of illuminated manuscripts and examples of textile art circulated, the artistic innovations developed within convents influenced broader artistic trends. The specific devotional needs and theological interpretations within nunneries sometimes led to the development of unique iconographical themes or artistic emphasis. For instance, the increasing emphasis on the humanity of Christ or the sorrows of Mary in late medieval devotion was often vividly expressed in artworks commissioned or created by nuns. This artistic output was deeply integrated into the spiritual life of the community. Art served as a visual aid for prayer, a means of contemplation, and an expression of devotion. The beauty of the illuminated page or the intricately embroidered vestment was intended to elevate the soul and draw the viewer closer to the divine. The artistic contributions of medieval nuns, whether through their own skilled hands or through their significant patronage, were instrumental in shaping the rich visual culture of the Middle Ages, demonstrating a profound engagement with creativity and aesthetic expression. Number 3. Healers and medical practitioners. Medieval convents were vital centers of healthcare, providing medical care and nursing services that were often the most advanced and accessible available in their regions. Nuns, particularly those designated as infirmarians, possessed a significant body of medical knowledge, blending traditional herbal remedies with classical medical theories. They ran well-organized infirmaries that served not only the monastic community, but also the local population, offering compassionate care and practical medical intervention in a period where public health care was virtually non-existent. The monastic infirmary was a dedicated facility within the convent complex, equipped to treat a range of illnesses and injuries. It typically included separate wards for different types of patients, a dispensary for medicines, and sometimes rooms for minor surgical procedures. The nuns overseeing these infirmaries were highly knowledgeable in the art of healing. Their medical education came from various sources: ancient medical texts copied and preserved in their libraries, practical experience gained over years of patient care, and a deep understanding of the medicinal properties of plants cultivated in their gardens. Convent garden, or herbarium, was essential to their medical practice, supplying a wide array of herbs, roots, and flowers used to prepare remedies. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess from the Rhineland, is an unparalleled figure in medieval medicine. Her medical treatises, particularly Causae et Curae, Causes and Cures, and Physica, Natural Science, represent a comprehensive body of medical knowledge. Causae et Curae explores human anatomy, physiology, and pathology, detailing the causes of various diseases and their treatments. Hildegard discussed conditions ranging from fevers and headaches to digestive issues and mental ailments. She prescribed a wide range of remedies, often drawing upon herbal knowledge, but also incorporating dietary advice, specific therapies, and even spiritual components, reflecting a holistic approach to health. For instance, she recommended specific diets for different temperaments, the use of certain stones for healing, and the importance of balanced humors within the body, concepts common in medieval medicine. Physica provided a detailed inventory of the medicinal properties of hundreds of plants, trees, animals, and minerals. For each item, Hildegard described its nature, its effects on the human body, and how it could be prepared for medicinal use. She noted, for example, the use of lavender for its calming and antiseptic qualities, or the application of rose oil for skin conditions. Her descriptions were precise and often based on careful observation, reflecting a scientific curiosity that went beyond simple superstition. The nuns would meticulously follow these recipes, preparing poultices, salves, tinctures, decoctions, and compresses. They understood the importance of dosage and proper preparation techniques. Convent infirmarians also practiced basic surgical procedures such as bloodletting, wound cleaning, and setting broken bones. They were skilled at bandaging and managing infections, crucial in an era without antibiotics. While major surgeries were rare and dangerous, the nuns provided competent care for common injuries and chronic conditions. They also played a role in midwifery, assisting local women with childbirth and providing care for new mothers and infants. Compassionate care provided by nuns extended to emotional and spiritual support. They offered comfort to the dying, counseled the mentally distressed, and provided a sense of peace and dignity to those suffering. This comprehensive approach to healing addressed not just physical ailments, but also the emotional and spiritual well-being of the patient. Quality of care in monastic infirmaries was often superior to what was available elsewhere. Unlike secular physicians, who might be expensive or inaccessible, nuns provided care often free of charge or in exchange for donations. Their institutions were stable, well-resourced, and focused on long-term care, providing a continuity of treatment that was rare. The commitment of nuns to healing was rooted in their vows of charity and service. They saw the care of the sick as a direct act of devotion. This dedication, combined with their practical knowledge and organized facilities, made convents indispensable centers of healthcare in medieval society. They trained generations of women in medical practice, preserving and advancing knowledge that would otherwise have been lost, and provided a crucial public service that alleviated suffering for countless individuals throughout the Middle Ages. Number 2. Educators and scholars. Medieval convents were crucial centers of learning and scholarship, offering a comprehensive education to women and fostering an intellectual environment that rivaled many male monasteries and universities. While access to formal education was limited for women in the Middle Ages, nunneries provided an invaluable opportunity for intellectual development, enabling women to become educated, literate, and even influential scholars and writers. These institutions preserved and transmitted knowledge, created new works, and educated noble and common women alike. The education provided in nunneries was extensive, far exceeding basic literacy. Novices and students in convent schools were taught Latin, the universal language of scholarship and the Church. This enabled them to read and understand a vast array of religious texts, classical literature, and philosophical works. Beyond Latin, the curriculum typically included rhetoric, logic, theology, arithmetic, music, and the arts. Music was a particularly important subject, as nuns were expected to participate in the elaborate liturgical services. They learned to read musical notation and sing complex chants. For example, the education at the Abbey of Gandersheim in Saxony, a highly regarded imperial nunnery, was renowned for its intellectual rigor. Hrotsvitha of Gandersheim, a canoness there in the 10th century, described the curriculum as comprehensive, encompassing the 7 liberal arts: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Nuns not only consumed knowledge but also produced it. Hrotsvitha herself was a prolific writer, recognized as the first known female dramatist in the West since antiquity. She composed 6 Latin plays modeled on the Roman playwright Terence, but with Christian themes to provide a moral and intellectual alternative to pagan literature. Her plays explored themes of chastity, martyrdom, and conversion, often featuring strong female protagonists. She also wrote epic poems including Gesta Autonis, a history of the Attonian emperors, and Primordia Koinobii Gandersheim, a history of her own convent. Her works demonstrate a deep classical education, a mastery of Latin, and a keen historical and theological insight. The very act of writing such sophisticated works shows the advanced level of education and intellectual freedom available to women within these monastic communities. Another prominent example is Hildegard of Landsberg, abbess of Hohenberg Abbey in Alsace in the late 12th century, who compiled the Hortus Deliciorum, Garden of Delights. This massive illustrated encyclopedia was designed as a didactic tool for the nuns in her community. It contained texts on theology, philosophy, history, literature, and science, alongside over 1,100 illustrations. The Hortus Deliciorum served as a comprehensive educational resource, covering everything from biblical history to the study of virtues and vices and even elements of natural history. Its creation required extensive knowledge, access to a wide range of source materials, and significant organizational and artistic skill. It demonstrates the nuns' commitment to continuous learning and their ability to synthesize vast amounts of information into an accessible format for educational purposes. Many convents also maintained schools for girls from noble and sometimes even common families who were not destined for monastic life. These girls received an education that was often superior to what they might have received elsewhere, preparing them for roles as literate and intelligent wives, mothers, or administrators in secular society. Such schools provided a crucial pathway for women to acquire literacy and a broader education, which was rare outside the monastic context. The skills learned, such as Latin, arithmetic, and perhaps even some legal or administrative knowledge, empowered these women in their future lives. The intellectual environment within leading nunneries was vibrant. Nuns engaged in scholarly discussions, corresponded with male scholars and religious figures, and actively participated in the intellectual currents of their time. They collected and maintained extensive libraries, ensuring access to a wide range of texts. They served as custodians of knowledge during periods of instability, copying and preserving ancient manuscripts that might otherwise have been lost. The very act of reading, interpreting, and debating texts was a form of scholarly engagement that fostered critical thinking and intellectual growth. The presence of educated women in such numbers within convents played a significant role in maintaining literacy and intellectual traditions throughout the medieval period. Their contributions as educators and scholars were fundamental in shaping the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages, providing avenues for women to pursue knowledge and contribute to the broader intellectual heritage of their time. Number 1. Preservers of knowledge and libraries. Medieval nuns were extraordinary custodians of knowledge, playing an indispensable role in the preservation, transmission, and creation of texts during a period when books were scarce and literacy was limited. Within the walls of their convents, sisters established and maintained extensive libraries and ran productive scriptoria, meticulously copying manuscripts that contained religious texts, classical literature, historical chronicles, and scientific treatises. These efforts ensured the survival of countless works that form the foundation of Western intellectual tradition. The scriptorium, or writing room, was a vital part of many large medieval convents. Here, nuns dedicated their lives to the laborious and painstaking process of copying manuscripts by hand. This involved preparing parchment from animal skins, a process that required skill and effort to make the surfaces smooth and uniform. They then used quills made from bird feathers and inks derived from natural pigments to transcribe texts. The work was slow and meticulous, often taking months or even years to complete a single book. Nuns were not merely transcribers. Many were also skilled illuminators, adding intricate decorations, elaborate initial letters, and detailed miniatures to the texts, turning each book into a work of art. Quality of their calligraphy and artistic skill was often exceptionally high, making their manuscripts highly prized. The types of texts copied by nuns were diverse and far-reaching. While liturgical books such as Bibles, Psalters, and Missals were a priority for daily worship, convents also actively copied and preserved secular works. This included classical Latin authors like Virgil, Ovid, and Terence, whose works might have otherwise been lost to time. They also copied historical chronicles, philosophical treatises, medical texts, and scientific works. This wide range of interests indicates a broad intellectual curiosity and a commitment to preserving a comprehensive body of knowledge. For example, the Abbey of Chelles near Paris, founded in the 7th century, became a renowned center of learning and manuscript traduction. Its library was vast, and its scriptorium was highly active, copying numerous texts, including those related to the Merovingian and Carolingian dynasties. Many of the scribes at Chelles were nuns, contributing directly to the transmission of both sacred and secular learning across generations. The libraries housed within convents were often impressive collections, sometimes rivaling those of male monasteries in their size and scope. These libraries served as repositories of learning, making books available for study, contemplation, and further copying. The sheer act of maintaining such a collection required significant resources, meticulous organization, and a commitment to intellectual pursuits. The Abbess of Quedlinburg, for example, presided over a library known for its rich collection of historical and theological texts, which supported the abbey's role as an educational and political center. The library of the Abbey of Gandersheim similarly contained a diverse array of books, enabling scholars like Hrotsvitha to access the literary and historical works necessary for her own extensive writings. Preservation of knowledge by nuns was particularly crucial during periods of political instability, war, or social upheaval. While other institutions might crumble, the relative stability and spiritual authority of convents often allowed them to safeguard their valuable collections. The meticulous copying practices also served as a form of intellectual continuity, ensuring that knowledge was not only preserved but also actively recreated and passed on. Texts they copied were not just static objects. They were living documents, constantly being read, studied, and influencing the intellectual life of the convent and beyond. Furthermore, nuns contributed to the creation of new knowledge through their annotations, commentaries, and original compositions. As they copied texts, they might add marginal notes, correct errors, or even contribute their own interpretations. The horticulture, compiled by Herod of Landsberg, stands as a testament to the intellectual creativity of nuns, combining existing knowledge with original insights and illustrations into a comprehensive educational tool. This work, though sadly mostly lost, was a monumental effort of knowledge, synthesis, and dissemination. The dedication of medieval nuns to the copying, illustrating, and preserving of manuscripts was a silent but profound contribution to the intellectual heritage of the world. Without their tireless efforts, many of the classical and early medieval texts that formed the bedrock of modern scholarship might have vanished forever, leaving a significant gap in our understanding of history, philosophy, and literature. They were the unsung librarians and publishers of their age, ensuring that the light of knowledge continued to shine through the often turbulent medieval centuries.